Kalimera, kalispera, kalinichta, no matter where in this wild, wacky, and sometimes wonderful world you might be. Thank you for making the Highbury Squad part of your day. Now, what's this about? Let's get stuck into it with Mr. Tom Canton. I read his article and was totally inspired. Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion doors. The next stop is Highbury Squad. Unusual hour for us, 6 p.m. in the UK, but when this man says he's available, you take that time slot. Thanks for everyone who's going to be tuning in on replay. And before Tom Canton corrects me and says, you're missing Jorginho, you're missing Thomas Partey from this image, there's a reason why I left them out. Regardless, welcome to Squad Central, one of our favourites, Mr. Tom Canton. At ease, sir, at ease.
How are we doing? Good, we well?
We're doing well. Yeah, we're good. You sound like Kevin Hatchard when you say that. Hello,
oh,
chaps.
yeah, really?
Well,
oh,
who
dear.
I love, by the way, Kevin Hatchard.
Oh, good.
Awesome.
It'd be awful if you hated him, and then you said,
yeah, no, God, no, I love him. I don't know if I enjoy talking to Kevin more about football or the Eurovision Song Contest.
My missus is a big fan of the Eurovision Song Contest. We have like Eurovision parties every year for that. I say we, I'm kind of dragged along. So, yeah. but there's a cheese board, so I'll take it.
Yeah. Listen, I'm a Eurovision disciple. There is no doubt about that. Good evening, squaddies. Hola, hola, hola. Please do listen to our Chief Like Officer, Tammy. Grantley Poos. That's an interesting one. Haven't seen you here before, but welcome. Tammy, thank you. PW, Galispera. Keith, hello. Carol, hello. Mark is in here somewhere. And Mark, I'm going to find your comment because I do believe this to be true. Let me. Guna Works is here, one of my favorites. I expect better punctuality from a former teacher. Detention for Tom. There are no favorites here. Tom gets his first yellow of the season.
That's fine.
In the book.
I'll take it. It's fine.
Write it down. Tom Canton.
I might just boot the ball away, see what happens.
Oh, that's amazing. By the way, are you over that? Are you?
No.
Has the anger subsided?
No. If we don't win the league, that's why. Just saying. I'm going to be sitting here in May going, it all unravelled after that point. We had the league stolen from us. So just be prepared for that, haters, when we rock up in May and I'm saying that. That's what I'm saying. So it's already locked in.
Honestly, I haven't. I don't think anyone has. Did you see so in my region, it was, they didn't broadcast. You can't watch certain Sky clips and stuff like that.
VPN for that.
Yeah. Oh, anyone, any recommendations?
Who? Chat box, who could it be?
God, I don't know what's wrong with my internet right now. I just switched it over, so I probably cut off for a minute. But I have no idea. Am I? It's choppy on my end. So
no, you've been smooth. Maybe it's me. Maybe the chat box
will
know.
It's not you. It's not you. It's me.
I'll leave now.
Tom, what was that video of Dermot Gallagher talking waffle that everyone... I didn't see it. What was that for those that missed it? What was the...
So obviously on Monday they do their Sky Sports Ref Watch where he looked at the Rice incident against Brighton. And in short, he basically said that Rice can't really have any complaints. But he also said that refereeing and common sense doesn't really go hand in hand, which was a really weird thing to say for a guy you get on to kind of bring the common sense, supposedly. Anyway, Arsenal fans did what Arsenal fans do and went back through the archives and found a near identical incident where Henry Lansbury, actually former Arsenal player, of course, kicks a Swansea midfielder or forward, I can't remember who the Swansea player was, kind of taps the ball away, kicks it more than what Rice does against Brighton, and Henry Lansbury does exactly what Veltman did and boots through the player and gets a yellow card for his troubles, not a red. But Dermot Gallagher says in his post-match, he's like, I can't believe he's not sent him off. Like, I can't believe he's not given him a red. And we're just sitting there as Arsenal fans like, you are just so obvious in your, inconsistency, as are so many referees today.
It's unreal, isn't it? It's kind of crazy. I honestly, these are the things I think that make fans kind of start falling out of love with football. The money, Leicester finding a loophole, just like, Amazon and Apple find loopholes with taxes and never ever pay it. I mean, it's just it's all a bit despondent, isn't it?
It's
do you find the same?
That doesn't help.
Is that why I'm feeling blue?
Yeah, I obviously, like, for the perspective of fans, like, it's like when we lose and when there's an international break. I feel as though if you're either a journalist or a content creator or an influencer on social media focused on Arsenal, like, you get it double, because you get it as a fan, either losing or drawing games or like not enjoying the international break. But when it's your job at the same time, you get it double, and you kind of like looking around for ideas, and you got to come up with things of what you want to talk about, and news isn't as frequent, so it really brings the mood to a real lull, especially when you haven't won the last game before it.
Well, robbed of the last game, maybe we should say.
Yeah.
Well, then there's that brings us beautifully into why you're here. I read an article by said Tom Canton, journalist, and I was thinking to myself, wow, I always thought Tom had genius in him, but this could be like the NFL tuck rule. This could be like one of those new rules that comes into play. And I want you to talk the listeners through it. For those who haven't read Tom's article in Football London, you can follow Football London. You can see the tag, the handle on screen right now. But I love this idea. I saw some comments from people saying, well, you're penalizing players. I don't think or agree to that. Can you explain to everyone what your idea was, which prompted me to do this show with you?
Yeah, so in short, I was going through one of those international break lulls and thinking about what I wanted to write about, and the news dropped that Ollie Watkins, Phil Foden, and Cole Palmer have all pulled out of England duty, as we see so often. Like, rarely we see it of Arsenal players. Sometimes we do, but rarely do we see Arsenal players pull out of international duty and then be back, of course, for the games for their clubs almost immediately after the break. And it got me thinking about like the fact that there's a good chance that Rice and Saka will play a really big part of these games, that Saliba will play a big part of France's games over this break as well. And these are all players, of course, who got to the semi-finals of the European Championships this summer. We saw Gabriel, of course, play with Brazil. I don't know how many minutes he played for the Brazil national side during the Copa America, but obviously they went relatively far in that tournament as well. And I just thought, I feel as though there should be a rule implemented for this specific international break, not for the others, because this international break is the worst in my view. You've just got the season back underway. You've played 3 games. Signings have been made on deadline day, and you want to see them, and then here comes the international break to ruin everyone's mood. And so I just feel as though that either a rule or at the very minimum, maybe a policy for England in particular, as an England fan myself, that a policy be put in place that if a player plays a certain number of minutes in the summer tournament, or not even the summer tournament, but just the tournament before the next international break, they are unable to be called up. So let's say, across you have 3 games in the group stage, then you have your last 16 quarters, semi-finals. So that's 7 potential games, 90 minutes minimum across all of them. Let's say that a player plays 450 minutes, which would be the amount of 5 full games in that summer tournament. If you play over 450 minutes, you're prohibited from being called up to the next international break. So if it's the African Cup of Nations or the Asia Cup, which sometimes take place, in the winter months, the March international break, I think it is, those players, again, would be prohibited from being called up to that specific international break. That's what I think should happen. That's how I think we could protect players from being overused and given a much-needed break at a certain point during the season.
Do you feel that kind of what prompted you to write this in some regard is it just feels like we got done with the Euros? and we were just getting over the transfer window, and we're 3 games in. It always seems to me, regardless of the Euros, for me personally, it seems like September is way too soon for an international break. And the Nations League, I'm not sure if fans in Europe take it seriously. I know here in the United States, it became a big deal because of the rivalry between the USA and Mexico, and the USA have won it twice now. So, it becomes something that they can kind of hold on to. You win a trophy, you have something to brag about. The women are off winning World Cups and gold medals in the Olympics. The men are winning the Nations League. So it gives them something to kind of advertise and market. Do you feel that maybe this is coming off of Euros, especially where you see Bukayo and Declan? Declan looks absolutely spent at the start of this season. I think he's been one of our worst players, and that's not me trying to dig Declan out. I just think it's a fact.
Yeah.
Is that why? Because it's so close to the Euros, does it feel a little bit more?
Yeah, that's definitely a factor. I think that England have obviously gone far in the majority of the last few tournaments they've played in particular, and so Saka and Rice have played a lot of football. And last season, I felt we started to see that really hit Saka with some of the injuries he was getting. He missed the Man City game. He missed the last game of the season. He pulled out of one international break with England as well because of injury, because he's getting kicked every single week. So that recency and it being just so early in the season, I think obviously sparks that frustration for fans. And we've seen so many times players get these injury problems. Thomas Partey's had issues while away with Ghana. Gabriel Jesus suffered a huge injury for his knee while at the World Cup in Qatar with Brazil. We've lost big players because of tournaments, because of, breaks. And with the Champions League expanding as well, and 2 more games being added to that against 8 teams. I was talking to Elliot yesterday on the channel about how it's actually more work, not just on the field, but off it, because before you'd have 3 teams that you have to prepare home and away against. Now Arteta and his analysts have got to prepare to play against 8 different sides. So that's more than double the amount of analysis and scouting and preparation for 8 different teams that you're now playing in those competitions. I like the new format personally. I'm quite a big fan of the change. The only the only thing I'm not a fan of is the extra games, is the 2 extra games. And I think that's a bit of an issue. But I like the idea of the league format. I think it's going to be exciting to see, all the teams playing off against one another rather than just kind of, of course they're going to win the group. And it will go down to those final games where some teams will be able to get into the top 8. Some teams are going to drop out the bottom 24. So that's going to be really interesting. And I think it's a good format, but it does create even more pressure on the players in terms of minutes.
They're just prepping us for the Super League Part 2. Tom, maybe that's the cynic in me. I don't know.
UEFA don't want that, obviously, but it's interesting that they've chosen a league as their next step for this competition.
Isn't it? Just saying. Okay, so you made a very poignant point, and what inspired you to write this article was seeing the players that dropped out and the teams of which they represent that dropped out. So my next question to you is, and I'll caveat it with this thought, is I think that we have become much better at the dark arts. Benjamin White fan club, Kai Havertz, Calafiori looks like he has those Italian dark arts about him too. But do the Arsenal have international game? Has Mikel Arteta mastered the art of Sir Alex Ferguson? Now, of course, Sir Alex can bully people, when you've won as much as he is and you have all of his experience. But has Mikel mastered the art of pulling players from moments like this? Is that a fair question? Or
Arteta hasn't mastered anywhere close to this art, if it even is an art. Like, it's one of those kind of unwritten things, isn't it? Like, managers will never admit that they are purposefully, a cheeky word in a player's ear saying, I don't think you're very well. No, boss, I'm fine. No, I don't think you're very well. I think that you're too ill to play the international break, sort of thing. I think we'd be naive to believe that doesn't happen. Really naive to think that, or to just think that, a player maybe that has a slight knock who normally would play through that for their club, but with it's a friendly coming up, they may be inclined to not play when they usually would play, or they'd have like pain injections or whatever. for these types of games. They would for their international nations, of course, for like proper competitive fixtures. But for friendlies and for Nations League games, which are just glorified friendlies at the end of the day, they're more important for the more smaller nations down those lower tiers that can qualify for the tournaments, whereas they would struggle otherwise. I think that's key. But also we want to think about the Club World Cup is looking to expand as well. FIFA are looking to expand a tournament that is set to, increase more games across other periods of the season where they would usually be on a break. And you start to ask the question, like, if we don't start making more of a noise, if authorities don't, if federations don't, if, the Players Association doesn't, then the players are going to have to start kicking up a fuss about the number of games they're playing as well. And the players' welfare needs to be considered, because while it's more money, more football, more opportunities to see, games played abroad. And that's a topic in itself, which I think is a bit controversial. I think that I'm in a privileged position living in England that I get to go and watch Arsenal play every single week. And there are fans that live in North and South America and in Asia and in Africa that don't. American fans are more privileged as well, because obviously Arsenal have gone there for pre-season for the last number of years, but haven't gone to Asia as they had before, or haven't gone to South America, haven't gone to Africa, haven't gone to Australia recently, although the women's team, of course, I think have recently. But yeah, like that's an interesting debate, because I personally think that pre-season should enable that, and I don't want to see competitive games outside of maybe those that would normally be played on a neutral ground be played abroad. And I think that would be a big mistake for them to do that.
It feels like it's all leading and brewing to the more globalization of the game. And I mean, the NFL starts tonight in these grand United States. Can't wait. Kansas City Chiefs. But I love it. I mean, I love it. Right. And they added games, 16, 18 games with a bye week. But they added the game not because they wanted the fans to have another game. It was an excuse to play that additional game abroad, and we've seen the expansion of where those games are played abroad. Started in Europe, South America, Asia, in the future. And they've set a precedent for this.
Could you explain, Sophie, like, because for me and for the benefit of others, like the NFL games when they're played, so they play obviously at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and they have done quite a few times. Is that how do they decide what game? You said there is an extra game, so it's not taking away a home game for one of the teams in the league. It's an additional.
No, they added
game.
one. Yeah,
they've added an extra game.
Yeah, there was 16 games in the regular season, and they added the additional game.
So they played each of the other teams home and away once. 8. Yes. So 8 teams home, 8 teams away.
And it's not just in your division, right? So you play games you could play East Coast, West Coast. You play teams that are out of your division, but you play the teams in your division twice. So there's 4 teams in each division. So there's 8 games, and then the additional games are spread among other teams across the league.
How's it decided who you play in your extra game?
It's a schedule that comes out. So
this is pre-decided.
This is where I need Will Gavin, who is the guru of the NFL. But it's a little bit like the way they announce the fixtures for the Premier League. Who decides that? A computer?
Right. The computer does that, yeah.
There's a lot more games though for the NFL. For the
people in the
Premier
chat are saying
League.
that some teams do lose a home NFL game, and it rotates every year. So this is why we need Gavin.
yeah. We do need Will Gavin. No, I don't know. Yeah, I'm sure they do lose a home game. For example, there's going to be how many games in Europe? There's going to be games in Germany. There's going to be games in Spain, and it all rotates. Yes, but regardless of that, my point was the additional game was never for the fans. The additional game was to justify that you're not taking a home game away from. In hindsight, you're not taking a home game away from the fans every season, but you're adding a game to infuse the idea of this kind of, playing a game abroad. The difference, I think, between the Premier League and the NFL is, listen, the history, the tribalism, I think, runs deeper in football in Europe. So, for example, if you have a big game, you've seen most big teams come and play in Europe, right?
Yeah.
It's not like home and away fans. It's really weird because if you go to a game in LA, LA is a melting pot of so many different people, right? So you could go to a Rams game and
Mm.
and if they're playing the Steelers, half the stadium could be Pittsburgh fans. It's really weird how that
Yeah.
happens. But in Pittsburgh, you will
Mm.
never have half the stadium full of Rams fans.
Yeah, of course.
So the home and away thing and if the Premier League were going to play a game here, I
Mm.
think the uproar would be far greater than the NFL. The NFL fans seem to be like they don't care. I think they did at first, but they don't care.
I think the issue for, like, you mentioned it, obviously, like the the extra game thing, the moving it. I think that the tribalism in, obviously, football is so much greater. Like, you can't have fans sitting together with the other. You do in
No.
rugby over here. I've been to a few rugby matches where, obviously, I've watched Bristol play Leicester, and you sit amongst each other, and it can get a little bit tense sometimes, but it's respectful because rugby is a very respectful sport. When they play and they respect the referee, whereas it doesn't happen in the same way in football. But you couldn't have that in football. Like, here, it just wouldn't happen. Like, the culture of the sport breeds separation of fans. And if you were to, for instance, because if you are going to play a game abroad from a Premier League game perspective, it's going to be Arsenal, Liverpool, it's going to be Man United, Man City, it's going to be Chelsea, Tottenham, whatever. It's going to be the biggest teams, that are going to play those games abroad. Because if it's, with respect, Ipswich against Southampton, you're not going to get. I mean, I remember the game between Arsenal and Bournemouth in pre-season. Like, the turnout for that in the the LA Galaxy Stadium was not a good turnout for that game,
But
and it
that
was
was
Arsenal
advertised
involved.
late. That
It
was
was
added
advertised
late.
late, to be fair. But if there is this absolute clamour and desperation you would maybe expect a greater
Yeah.
turnout. But obviously, there was barely. I think my colleague who was there said he didn't see a Bournemouth fan all day, in that game. So you're not going to get necessarily. I'm sure there were some there, but you're not
Mhm.
going to get it for like a Southampton Ipswich game, for instance, if that was played abroad. And then the other side of it is you can't add an extra game to a Premier League season, not because necessarily of the extra, expenditure, but it's like fans would be an absolute uproar that say Arsenal's extra game was against City, whereas Liverpool got an extra game against Southampton, for instance. You could never keep the sporting integrity of the league if you started to play Premier League matches in other countries.
Yeah, I agree. And I disagree with Mark. There's certain games you cannot, for example, if you took a Cowboys versus Niners game out of the States, people would go mad.
Mm.
There's certain games if you did the Chiefs versus the Broncos, you can't do that, right? There's certain if you did the Packers versus the Bears, I don't know if that's happened, but fans would not stand for that. There are certain it's like the Premier League. No one cares about Southampton versus Ipswich, but people do care about the Packers versus the Bears, the Niners versus the Cowboys. They care about, the Rams versus the Night. There's certain division rivalries that you just cannot mess with, right? And there's certain stadiums where you can't necessarily go sit next to a fan. Yes, it might happen, but there's certain teams like Cowboys, Steelers, the Giants, even the Giants and the Jets play in the same stadium. They loathe each other. So, yes, even though the game has been globalized, there's still those certain matchups that there is that tribalism. And dare you take away those types of games from fans here, I think there'll definitely be uproar. So yeah, Jonathan, an NFL would never mess with those rivalries. Yeah, they would riot. They absolutely would. Okay, so last word on your concept and idea. Any chance anything like this could happen in the future? Rules do change in football often, but something like this to me seems like money's more important than player health and safety. And federations have to make money, and the window for them to do so, Tom, is very slight.
Yeah, I would be absolutely beyond shocked if anything close to this policy came in. There's just such a lack of I think, awareness from the powers that be to lessen the strain on players. I also don't think, I think some of the retorts that came back were like, for instance, that, well, wouldn't that, some nations obviously typically have players go further in tournaments or play more minutes in tournaments, so they'd be at a disadvantage against other sides. And I don't necessarily think they would, because this particular break is just the Nations League. The Nations League groups teams against similar kind of level sides. So if you're going up against a similar level team, it's most likely those nations will also have lost players. So across the board, it will be very similar. So I think it's the best option I've seen, and that's not coming from a point of view of, I think I'm right. It's the best option I've seen put out there personally to try and utilize an international break in not only a way that limits game time for these players that are playing loads of minutes, but also gives opportunities to other players that wouldn't typically get chances at international level. Gives international managers a forcible, way of seeing players that they wouldn't tend to usually pick. So I think, that's also another benefit to it.
Well, you can read Tom's article, visit Football London, follow Football London on the old Twitter sphere. And I am for the Canton rule. I liked it. I liked it a lot, hence why I invited you on the show today. But while I have you here, of course, that's not the only reason I want to speak to you, because there's a lot going on. And the chat is going a little bit crazy in terms of Martin Odegaard. Has this just happened, or did this happen before we came on air, Tom?
So, as always with social media, it seems that misinformation spreads very, very quickly. The Martin Odegaard situation is obviously he came off against Brighton after getting quite a big kick from Minte and has gone to the Norwegian national side. And the Norway coach, Solbakken, has come out to say that, has made a couple of comments about Odegaard, saying it's not just the Brighton bang. He said it's like he's had a bang, which is the word he used, somewhere else or something. I've not heard anything to suggest he's come back or he's returned. There was also suggestions that he had actually already trained with the Norway team as well, unless the bang relates to something after that's happened in that training session. But I think this is one where obviously things can spiral pretty quickly. One person says Odegaard injury and someone hears it and runs with it and thinks, oh my God, Odegaard's injured. And I've not seen any credible sources at the moment, unless someone can point to me where they are, which I've missed. But I can't see any credible sources at the moment talking about an Odegaard injury to the point where he's coming back from international duty early yet.
Yeah, and this is a player that didn't play in the Euros and has had time to rest. And this would be exceptionally unfortunate because we already have a depleted midfield. This would be disaster. People have been saying disaster, but I've been like, no, calm. I was talking to Pedro from the Arsenal Opinion podcast as well, and we were both talking about how the panic is a little extreme. When you look at our midfield, of course, I made this when Marino was still healthy, but losing him ahead of a North London derby would be catastrophic, I think. And I wanted to talk to you about that because I wanted to get your take on the North London derby. But before I do that and get what your starting 11 looks like, Tom, is Raheem Sterling. I am starting the Rah Rah Raheem Club. I've been a fan for a long time. You and I spoke 2 or 3 weeks ago, and you said to me, "So, would you take Raheem Sterling?"
Yeah, we
and
did.
I made a case for him, and I said at the end of it, clip this, because at the end of the season, Arsenal fans will thank me. I'm going to wait for that clip until the end of the season, of course, because, well, it benefits me. Jokes aside, I think this signing was not desperate. It didn't smack of old Arsenal. It was perfectly planned and executed. And I love the 30. Welcome to the Dirty 30 Club, Raheem. This, to me, could be the type of signing where we look back and say, the way Trossard helped the squad, I think this is going to be similar. What say you about Raheem?
Yeah, initially I had the feeling of kind of like, oh, it's a bit of a panic deal because, it's late in the window. He's a player who's obviously not done too well at Chelsea in the last year or so. He needs a move. But when you look at the context of the deal, which is a loan with no fee, Chelsea are paying more than half of his wages. It's an incredible kind of deal for Arsenal to have done. like monetarily. He also is, a player that actually got, a decent return last year. It turns out 17 goal contributions, 10 goals, 7 assists across all competitions in 40 something games, which is again is a better return than maybe people thought he had. And as opposed to signing no one in that forward line, as what I said to you, I was like, yeah, we can have, if it was like a choice, would we have signed Sterling? No, we would have signed somebody else. But if the choice was Sterling or nobody, you would have been mental to pick nobody out of those two options, because Sterling, of course, is the experience that he has, the quality we know that he has, the versatility that he's got to play on the left or the right, or even in desperate cases through the middle, is going to be an asset to us. He's worked with Mikel Arteta before, who is the man that he credits of getting the best from him. So there is so many pluses to this when it's as opposed to signing no one, or instead keeping Reece Nelson. He's a far better player than Reece Nelson. That's, I really like Reece Nelson. I thought Reece Nelson was one of the standout players of pre-season, but he's a much better player than Reece Nelson, a much better option. And he's going to be used more than Reece Nelson would have been used by Mikel Arteta. So, yeah, it's a really astute piece of business, actually, when you take a step back and look at the context of how the window was closing out.
I liked Elliot's answer on your show too. I listened to it last night, and I really thought that his response on signing a Nico Williams versus a Sterling, who would you take now? He'd take Sterling. I also really liked your response, even though our African Gunners, who you can hear tomorrow live on the show at 12:30 UK time, will probably disagree with this vehemently. But I also agreed with your take on Kai Havertz versus Victor Osimhen, which kind of went viral on TalkSport. By the way, it's great seeing you in studio on TalkSport. So deserved. And I'm so proud of how you kind of represent and talk about the club. And you actually had, because I thought, let me go into the comments here and see what they're saying.
Yeah.
And you had a lot of people
I was surprised how
with
much
you.
support there was, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. And the same with Elliot's take on Sterling versus Nico Williams. Now, look, this isn't about saying he's not a talent. He was immense and he was fabulous in a system for Spain, surrounded by like 10 other great players. I would take Sterling now too, for the reasons Elliot said. You know,
I would have rather Nico Williams, I'll be honest, of the two. If you're talking about Sterling in his prime,
for this season, for now, for
even
we're
for
at.
now, like landing one of the best talents in Europe, I would have still taken Williams. I respect Elliot's view on that. I absolutely empathise where he's coming from as well, because Williams doesn't necessarily start the season in great form either. It's worth pointing out for Athletic, and he stayed there. And it would have been way more expensive, of course, to do that, and maybe a bit of a risk still doing it. But I still looked at Nico Williams being as, he's someone who's now on the Ballon d'Or list for this upcoming achievement. So his contributions for Spain, another Spaniard coming into the team, which is clearly got an emphasis that we're starting to see with some of the transfers we're making. I think that it would have been a really, really exciting deal for Arsenal to do, but financially it would have been huge.
Sorry, I was just looking at this question about, and you answered it for me, about Sterling being able to play against Chelsea. You know what? Unpopular opinion. I think Nico Williams is going to be one of those players that fades. I think he's going to be.
I hope you're right.
I think he's super talented, and I think he'll have a phenomenal career in. There's something about him.
There's the Barca deal about him.
Who was the PSG player I also said the same to you about on another show? Who was the midfielder? Plays for PSG.
Midfielder.
Yeah. That you and
Sensio?
Albert. No.
Or Ugarte? Or
was it Ugarte?
Vitinha? João Neves?
God, no,
Fabian?
Does he play for PSG?
No,
we're talking about mid. We were trying to play. Talk about. There were. Is it PSG? Was it Ugarte? No, it wasn't. I'm going to remember. There was a midfielder that we were talking about on the show. It was me, you, and two others. And I said I would rather have Zubimendi or Marino over him all day long.
Oh, João Neves is the youngster that moved to PSG. 19.
Yeah, no, I'm going to have to remember. I have to remember. Okay, so let's get stuck into this a little bit too then. So who starts? What does your team look like against Tottenham North London derby, Tom?
If the people that we think will be fit are fit, which obviously includes Odegaard at the moment, we don't really know about Gabriel Jesus yet. Hopefully we see him back in training very soon. It seemed as though it was only a minor issue, so hopefully he will be back after this break. I would personally move Havertz into midfield to replace Declan Rice. I think Havertz had an excellent couple of games in midfield against Liverpool and against Bayer Leverkusen this summer. And if Jesus is back, I would start Jesus with Trossard on the left, because against Bayer Leverkusen in particular, those three were excellent and were unplayable against one of Europe's best teams. I know it was only a friendly, but Havertz, Jesus, and Trossard were brilliant in that game. And the alternative is Jorginho, who I'm not convinced. He's not played a single minute of Premier League football this season yet. And that's got me worried about playing Jorginho in midfield, because to come in, after no minutes in the Premier League into such a huge game, I think I'd rather lean on Havertz in midfield, who is in decent form, who has showcased his abilities to play there, has, the work rate to get up and down the pitch and play with Partey, but also play with Odegaard, and then either play Jesus. And if Jesus isn't fit, then you've got the choice of either playing Trossard there and Martinelli left, or you've got the option to play even Sterling in through the middle, which could be an option as well. So there are options for us, but I just wouldn't play Havertz. I wouldn't play him I wouldn't play Jorginho instead of Havertz for this particular game. I think away at Man City, there's an option to do that, because you might need to be more defensive, but we need to be more offensive, I think. And so having Havertz in there is going to be better.
Because you're thinking about counter, right? The high line, the high line of Tottenham, and having the speed to counter.
Yeah.
So what I want to just ask you quickly, because it did sound like a bit of a panic, because I was listening to your show and it sounded not like a panic, but should we be concerned about the Jorginho? You sounded exceptionally concerned.
I just think it's odd that he's not played any minutes at all. Like, none of the games we played this season really have necessarily. I mean, the Wolves game, we could have brought him in toward the end. You weren't going to bring him on against Brighton when you're in that position. Maybe you could have brought him in at the end of the Villa game, but he's not played any minutes at all. I've seen some people suggest even playing Timber or Zinchenko midfield. I'm like, you want to throw two players that have never played midfield for Arsenal into our biggest away game, narrative-wise of the season? That's mad to do that. And Jorginho, again, after playing no minutes, I'd rather play Havertz, because the midfield is the most important area of your team. It is the most important area because it feeds the attack. It's, shields the defense and progresses your play. It's the hub, the heart of your team. And so you can't experiment for one of the biggest games. So Havertz plays there and has played there, and has this summer played there more recently as well, and has played plenty of minutes this season. So I just think if you're going to prioritize the hub of your team, Havertz has to go into it for this game.
Okay, so here's a wacky thought, and let me know what you think about this. I so often see, whether it's Barcelona, I've seen Liverpool do it a lot over the years. Manchester City have done it with, I think, their right back, and then the young player who broke his leg, unfortunately, in the summer, thrown into the mix in the Champions League last season. Why not Waneri? Why not him? Why don't we do that, Tom? Why not?
Again, similar to kind of the Timber Zinchenko suggestions, I think throwing in Waneri to start this one is a big ask. Like he'd understand the gravitas of it. He's an Arsenal fan. He gets it on that level. But that's the type of game, if he has a terrible game, because of the situation, because of the scenario, because it's his first fixture, you could end up, really killing a young player before their careers even started. And that's,
you mean like Charlie Patino in the Forest FA Cup?
The Forest FA Cup game effectively ended Charlie Patino's chances. He wasn't good in that game, and that was against Forest, who at that time were in the lower division. And it was a real nightmare. You never saw him again play. I don't think he played a senior minute again competitively after that game. So it's worth bearing in mind that Nwaneri's going to play a part this season. I'd start him against Bolton in the League Cup third round for sure to give him his first start competitively. But I think that the best way to implement him is that game and to bring him off the bench in certain fixtures you're able to.
So help Tammy here, because I think this is a really good question, and not all fans think super deep on tactics, but they see what they see, they say what they see. And when Zinni plays left back, he spends most of his time playing in the midfield. It's funny because I heard Jason and Jamie last night poo-pooing modern day football sayings inspired by Football Manager, inverted left back and this and that and the other.
Yeah.
What do you say to Tammy and fans like Tammy who question that?
So it's not just about like your where you play on paper, and obviously Zinchenko does spend a lot of his time when Arsenal are in possession in midfield. But it's also about roles and spaces. So when Zinchenko moves into midfield, Declan Rice is pushing further up the pitch to vacate the space that Zinchenko is then filling when he's in that role. So if you move Zinchenko into midfield, he's not, and start him as a midfielder, he's not playing the role he plays when he starts at left back. It's a completely different, set of characteristics and traits that you would need to. And I'm not saying that he can't do that, because he does play in midfield for Ukraine, as Priska points out there. But Ukraine don't play the same system as Arsenal. He doesn't play the same, he wouldn't be playing, a midfield role for Ukraine that he would be playing if he was utilised there for Arsenal. So it's about spaces and understanding your role. And again, if you're going to throw a player into midfield for one of the biggest games of our season and experiment at this stage, I just don't think this is the right time. I'd happily start him in midfield against Bolton in the League Cup and give him an opportunity to, to learn that role as you would be starting as midfielder. But when you start as a left back and you're inverting, you're doing different things. And the player that plays in midfield and starts in midfield is also doing different things. So it's not as simple as just saying, oh, he plays there for his country, so therefore he can do it here, because it's so different and the job is so different.
Interesting. Yeah. Are we giving too much respect to Tottenham?
I mean, maybe. They don't look great. But for a derby, everything kind of goes out the window, doesn't it? Like, derbies just generate a completely different, unless you're Man United, like derbies just generate like a completely different kind of feel about it. And Tottenham turn up against us usually. And, I know that we were quite dominant against them last season, but that game could have swung a number of ways. The penalty situation, the opportunity Spurs had in our box, the kind of tennis court type feel to that game last season that there was. And they took points off us at the Emirates last season, let's not forget. So, yes, they've not looked great. They create, as Jonathan's pointing out there, they create chances. They're unpredictable, and that's what makes them a danger. So it's difficult to know how and what Tottenham will turn up, but there's definitely not a reason to underestimate them.
Yeah, and never underestimate. Form goes out the window, the old cliche about the derby. Right, we'll get you out on these ones, Tom. Announcements today, and I just wanted to know if any of you actually care, since the snubs that the Arsenal Football Club have faced over the years. The Ballon d'Or nominations came out, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4 Arsenal players. Do you care? Should Arsenal fans care? Is this important? Does this show Mikel does coach up? Some of the responses I saw to Declan's nomination were just ridiculous. Odegaard and Saliba and Saka seem, but deserved. I think Declan had a phenomenal season last year. What's your say on the Ballon d'Or?
Yeah, there was, in response to kind of those that feel as though like Declan Rice's inclusion is a bit strange. Obviously, like, this is a player that has now been put in the PFA Premier League Team of the Year. He was obviously involved in that, and I saw I think it was James at AFCJXMES on Twitter put up a graphic of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 Player of the Match awards that Declan Rice won last year, and the Premier League Player of the Year nomination. He was he's so important for this Arsenal team, and he will be hugely missed, of course, for this game against Tottenham as well. This nomination, I'm not a big fan of the Ballon d'Or. I don't really care about it. But what the Ballon d'Or nominations of having 4 Arsenal players in there, which, by the way, doesn't include, I don't know if David Raya has been nominated for the goalkeeper one.
For the Shin Award.
Is there a specific one for the goalkeepers?
Yes,
or are they
there is. He must be. The squaddies will let us know.
Because I know that Emi Martinez has been nominated
for the Yashin Award.
Is it a Yashin Award? I don't know.
Yashin, yeah. See, you always correct me on my.
I don't know if Raya has been nominated.
If he's not, then it would be outrageously.
I haven't seen it. I don't think he has.
That would be outrageous, considering he had the most clean sheets in the Premier League last season.
Well, Yashin nominees are Diego Costa from Porto, Donnarumma from PSG, Gregor Kobel from Dortmund, Lunin from Real Madrid, Mike Maignan from Milan, Mamardashvili from Valencia, Emi Martinez from Villa, Unai Simon from Athletic Club, Jan Sommer from Inter, and Ronwen Williams from Mamelodi Sundowns are the
wow, I like their album. Mamelodi, I like their album. That was a good album.
Yeah. So Raya's not on that list at all.
Is it because he didn't play in the Euro final?
Maybe because he was there, but he got the Golden Glove in the Premier League last season, so that seems a bit odd that he's not been included. But for me, that's, let's say 5 with an asterisk with David Raya next to it, because he definitely, in my opinion, should be included in that list. This is a big deal because it showcases that Arsenal have, 4 of the best players in the world in their team now. And what's interesting about them, Odegaard, Rice, Saliba, and Saka are all 25 and under as well. They're not players, Liverpool haven't got a single player in there, by the way. Van Dijk's not in there. Salah's not in there. Neither of them got nominated. It shows you how the progression of this club, the recruitment, the strategy, the development of our own players like Saka, that Arteta and Edu are both responsible for. It shows you where we were and where we are now and what we're producing. We'd have like Aubameyang was in there before, Alexis Sanchez, Ozil were nominated as well. But we never had 4, potentially 5 if Raya got the rightful nomination he deserves. We've never had that many. And Arsenal,
not even in our Invincibles teams, right?
Yeah,
did we have?
Arsenal have the second highest, the joint second highest number of nominations. Real Madrid have 7, we have 4, Man City have 4. So it shows you that progress. It shows you the improvement. And I believe that Arsenal next summer will probably look to add a 5th or 6th player in the transfer market, or potentially could even have through their own development, be it Ben White, be it Gabriel, be it, who knows, Mikel Moreno, be it, Leandro Trossard if he has an excellent season, be it Kai Havertz. These are players that definitely could be in with a chance next year if they do well of getting into that Ballon d'Or shortlist. So, I'm very excited to see the continuation of the project of this team, because it is brilliant to see where we were and where we are now.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because you have Matt Hummels on this list, right? Which I don't get. You have Lautaro Martinez, which is totally built on international, right?
Yeah,
and
Copa America.
Right.
He had a very good season for Inter, I think, to be fair. I don't remember. He won Serie A with Inter, I suppose.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Florian Wirtz and Granit Xhaka deserved, I think.
Absolutely, yeah, brilliant.
Right.
Wirtz would win it for me, personally.
Yeah, I thought he was the best player, like one of the best players last year. But I'll show you who my best player is. Lamine Yamal, phenomenal, great Euros. But, I mean, he had a good season. Yeah. They didn't have a great season. I think Gundogan was their best player last season. You got Cole Palmer. Come on, really? The best player in the world?
I think Cole Palmer probably deserves it, so I think that's your bias coming in.
Palmer scored in the European final. Saka had to wait.
I know Saka had to wait.
So did Ollie Watkins.
Season were immense.
And he got his team into the Champions League.
Final. Yeah,
Same season. Same season.
I know.
Anyway, okay, fine. Well, all right, we could go all day about this, but here's my
Do you know who got more goal contributions than Lamine Yamal last season?
How many?
He got 16. Do you know? He got more goal contributions than that.
Saka.
Sterling.
Sterling, really?
Sterling got
Saka
more
got
goal
less than
contributions
16, didn't he?
for his club than
Saka,
Yamin Lamau. Yeah.
Saka was Saka 13 or 14 goal contributions last year?
17.
17. Right. Okay.
Across all comps.
By the way, for those who care, and I do care, the women's Ballon d'Or nominees were announced also. And I would like to just say that the fact that Naomi Girma, which probably doesn't mean a lot to our listeners, and that's fine, but you could go look her up. The fact that she wasn't nominated is an absolute, it's a Thierry Henry moment for US women's national team fans of San Diego Wave, the NWSL. She is the best defender in the world right now. Emma Hayes, the current manager of the US women's national team, gold medal winners. It's an absolute crime that this woman, this player, has not been nominated. It is. I don't even understand it. And, you know, fine. What Bonmati or one of those Barcelona players will probably win. But Putellas, I don't agree with that. Again, I just don't I don't like how the Ballon d'Or kind of focuses in on certain tournaments versus really who played the best, regardless of whether or not they won anything. But I guess you have to win. Sports is about winning.
Also shows you like how the recruitment in the Arsenal women's team is still really quite impressive, because they brought in Mariona Caldente as well. So that, you know, for those that aren't maybe as well versed, and I'm not an expert, you know, in women's football at all, you know, it's really something I'm learning more about every season, but it shows you again, like the recruitment at Arsenal is not just about the men's side, and what Edu's job expands beyond just the men's team, and he was a big part of getting her into the team.
Yeah, and we'll see. I mean, for me, Alyssa Naya was unbelievable, the goalkeeper, but it's so hard. Naomi Girma's a defender. It's so hard. We saw, you know, Carvalho was Carvalho? No, Fabio Cannavaro was the last defender to win the Ballon d'Or. It's so hard. Yeah. But for me, the winner is Rodri.
Yeah.
Stick a fork. I mean, he's the best player in the world for me right now. He's so important. He's the best. You can have your Kylian Mbappe. If I was starting a football team today, on paper, right, Rodri would be my number one pick.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't disagree.
Yeah.
Simple as that. I don't really have anything else to add. And that's what Arsenal are up against. Arsenal are up against the best midfielder in the world, the best striker in the world, probably still on paper the best creator in the world in De Bruyne. You know, they've got one of the best goalkeepers in the world in Ederson. They've got one of the best centre half pairings, you know, with Ruben Diaz, of course, but they've got an amazing wealth of talent there. Bernardo Silva's still there. Gundogan's come back. You know, like that's what Arsenal are up against. You know, and they've not had Rodri at the beginning of the season either, and Haaland's just absolutely destroyed the league in the first 3 games. That's what we got to be.
All right, get you out on this one on a quick fire. Manager of the month. I don't think Mikel deserves it. I really don't. I don't.
I'd say Arne Slot. New team, 3 games, 3 wins, playing. You know, the improvement he's already had in that Liverpool team is startling, to be honest. And he had 2 decent openers, you know, against teams they'd be expected to beat. But Slot beating Man United by just taking them apart was excellent.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. And Fabian Hürzeler is making people want to hurl already, I think.
Yeah, he lost any nominations by his bullshit press conference after the game. So yeah.
He's exceptionally arrogant, but you know what? So was Arteta when he first started. He's a bit more humbled now. Speaking of humble, I know you do this too, Tom. I don't know how many tickets are left as of today, but the draw is on Monday. I feel like this is going to sell out in the next 24 hours. But it's your chance to win. It's a triple threat. Once again, more than half have gone. Arsene Wenger signed and custom framed Arsenal shirt. I believe there's a built-in TV on this one. You can also win a Pires, Edu, Dixon signed shirt. And listen, $3.95 to get some awesome memorabilia. I honestly think, aside from the fact that Football Prizes are our partner, I think this is ridiculously fair. I would enter all the time if I could. I can't. but I would enter all the time if I could. And I love the way that they've been really creative over the last 2 seasons with how they present their prizes, Tom. And Arsene Wenger, definitely one that Arsenal fans would want up on their wall somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good prize, that.
That's a good one. Very good. And by the way, kids, tomorrow live is our first Afro Gunners show with Femi Raji live from Nigeria. You can tune in at 12:30 UK time. I will put it up after this show. Tune in for some great guests and our very first live show from the wonderful continent of Africa. And you guys will enjoy it. There's going to be a lot of energy. So please do make sure that you tune in tomorrow at 12:30 UK time. Tom, what would you like to leave these squaddies with today? Your final thought.
On this morning's show, and obviously I know this relates quite poignantly to this show, and I don't want to get too deep, but on this morning, our listeners at TGT are very honest, and one of them shared with me this morning that sadly they lost their father-in-law this morning or over the last couple of days. And so I think, as always, I want to bring the conversation back to making sure we're looking after our mental health and looking after one another. So yeah, just there's more important things than football, people. And as I say, if anyone ever needs to take a break from it, you should use the opportunities you get to take a break from it and be with the ones close to you. So that's what I'd go with.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much, Tom. And please don't forget to go read Tom's article in Football London. Thank you always for your time. We love doing shows with you. And you know what? Super Kev would be really proud of this show that we're doing live with Femi from Africa. So we're going to leave you with our tune, our theme tune for the show, because he would love that too. And in Super Kev fashion, remember the rules here. Don't forget to tell your loved ones you love them. Until the next time. We'll talk to you soon, and thank you. And for you, Terence, here it is. Good night, everyone.
It's cloudy, right? From Cairo to Dakar, chance from afar. Territory no surrender. Asna, Femi Raji, you did. They were the better. Highbury spirit, we no go die. We Africans, we take the on top of beating record. We never gon' flop. Niger to Ghana, Saudi to Zambia, and Rwanda. We gotta dey move. We Africans, we take the on top of beating record. We never gon' flop. Niger to Ghana, Saudi to Zambia, and Rwanda. We gotta dey move. Afro Gunners from Nigeria, Kampala, Bamako. Make them para everywhere, everywhere. Here we go. I'm eating for record. DPL, red down. They never win league. I'm a lobby, so no matter challenge. We remain. I don't pick us enough for the game. With the best, tell them. Say, better show their face. Baba Femi talk, say, come and go the wallet. Dance for Bantam on me, I did. With the best, tell them. Say, better show their face. We Africans, we take the on top of beating record. We never gon' flop. Niger to Ghana, Saudi to Zambia, and Rwanda. We gotta dey move. We Africans, we take the on top of beating record. We never gon' flop. Niger to Ghana, Saudi to Zambia, and Rwanda. We gotta dey move. Gunners worldwide, Africa we dey, unbeaten forever. Asna all the way, They rush to Kigali, say, they shout with pride, Asna for life, till the day we die. We Africans, we take the on top of beating record. We never gon' flop. Niger to Ghana, Saudi to Zambia, and Rwanda. We gotta dey move. We Africans, we take the on top of beating record. We never gon' flop. Niger to Ghana, Saudi to Zambia, and Rwanda. We gotta dey move. On top, God, club, Ghana, Zambia, Rwanda. We take the on top, we never gon' flop. Saudi to Zambia, and Rwanda. We gotta dey move. This is the Afro Gunner Show, brought to you by Baba Femi Raji, happening on the Highbury Squad podcast on Arsenal Radio. Keep listening, don't touch that dial. Yes, sir. It's cloudy, right? From Cairo to Dakar, chance from afar. Territory no surrender. Asna, Femi Raji, you did. They were the better. spirit. We no good die. We Africans, we take the on top of beating record. We never gon' flop. Nigeria to Ghana, Saudi to Zambia, and Rwanda. We gotta get move. We Africans, we take the on top of beating record. We never gon' flop. Nigeria to Ghana, Saudi to Zambia, and Rwanda. We gotta get move. Afro-Ghanaians from Nigeria, Kampala, Bamako. Make them para everywhere, everywhere. Here we go. I'm eating for record. BPL, red down. They never win league. I'm a novice, so no matter challenge. We remain. I don't pick us enough for the game. With the best, tell them. Say, better show their face. Baba Femi talk, say, come and go the one day. That's for Bantam and me, I did. The best, tell them, say, better show their face. We Africans, we take the on top of beating record. We never gon' flop. Nigeria to Ghana, Saudi to Zambia, and Rwanda. We gotta get move. We Africans, we take the on top of beating record. We never gon' flop. Nigeria to Ghana, Saudi to Zambia, and Rwanda. We gotta get move. Ghana's worldwide, Africa we take, unbeaten forever. Arsenal all the way, Arsenal all the way. They rush to Kigali, say, we shout with pride, Arsenal for life, till the day we die. We Africans, we take the on top of beating record. We never gon' flop. Nigeria to Ghana, Saudi to Zambia, and Rwanda. We gotta get move. We Africans, we take the on top of beating record. We never gon' flop. Nigeria to Ghana, Saudi to Zambia, and Rwanda. We gotta get move. On top, God, flop, Ghana, Zambia, Rwanda. We take the on top. We never gon' flop. Saudi to Zambia, and Rwanda. We gotta get move. This is the Afro-Ghana show, brought to you by Baba Femi Raji, happening on the Highbury Squad podcast on Arsenal Radio. Keep listening, don't touch that dial. Yes, sir.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion boards. The next stop is Highbury Squad.
Surrender, Arsenal, Femi Raji.